All right, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at in the world. Hope everything's going okay. I'm just getting my webcam settings around there, so you're getting my good side and not my bad side, right? So anyway, hope everyone's having a good day. And we got a lot of great content to share with you today. So I know we're at 8 o'clock, so at least where I'm at, and we're gonna get started here. We got a lot of great content to get through. So first off, you're here to learn about transforming your MSP into a Lean CSP machine. First thing, let's talk about our agenda for today. So first off, we're going to start with some introductions of myself, Altero, who's the sponsor of this webinar, and then we're going to get to, really the meat and potatoes of what you're here to listen to today. So first, we're going to talk about, what kind of struggles are MSPs dealing with today. We're going to talk about what is a CSP. How does Microsoft define a CSP? We're going to talk about MSPs versus CSPs. What's the difference? I talk about that from the standpoint of both an organizational differences as well as some sales organization differences as well, because that's kind of a key differentiator there. We're going to talk about the CSP services and offerings. We're going to talk about how to migrate some of your current services, and then we'll do some wrap up and Q&A at the end. Now, one thing I want to mention about the Q&A. Feel free to ask your questions as we step through the webinar today. I'm going to keep my eye on the questions form here, and if I have a chance to kind of organically address any questions as they come in, I certainly will. Otherwise, feel free to get your questions in. We've got a section at the end of the webinar today where we will, spend some time addressing the ones that we haven't gotten to yet. One other thing on the Q&A, if you ask a question that we don't have time to get answered today, we always do some sort of follow-up blog post that contains a link to the webinar, a link to the slide deck, a recording, as well as a full list of the questions and their associated answers. So if you ask a question today that doesn't get answered, keep an eye out on the Altero blogs. We'll get you an answer sometime in the near future. Now let's get to our introduction. So first off, I'm going to introduce myself. So my name is Andy Serwich. I am a Microsoft MVP in the Cloud and Data Center Management competency. If you've watched Altero webinars in the past, you may have seen me as an actual Altero employee coming and speaking to you. I've actually gone on to another company, a cloud solution provider actually, called Insight Business Solutions, where I'm an enterprise client advisor. Our website is there, trustedinsight.com. If you're a Twitter user, I'm very active on Twitter on most days. My handle is @aserwich. My apologies. You'll have to spell the last name. One of these days, I need to get around to changing that to, I don't know, Andy Sandwich or something funny like that. But that's what it is today. Let's talk about Altero Software, the sponsor of today's webinar. So Altero Software was founded in 2009. And, really their solutions are targeted towards companies with less than 1,000 employees. Altero has 50,000 plus customers across 121 countries, 10,000 plus partners worldwide, including 2,000 plus MSPs. A ton of great 5-star reviews. The entire product suite is amazing. So the 5-star reviews don't come as a surprise to me. And there's been just a ton of growth over the last several years. So let's get to our content today. So, the one thing I like to do with a lot of webinars, especially webinars like this one, where we're talking about not so much a technical topic, but more of a structural, technology business topic. I always like to kind of start with a poll, just so let's frame the discussion. Let's see where we're at. So the first thing I want to do is I've got a poll here, talking about, what are the biggest challenges facing your MSP today? So let me get this poll out and let's actually launch it. So what is the biggest challenge facing your MSP today? So that poll is live. If you'd like to go ahead and fill that out, your feedback would be greatly appreciated. So we've got a number of different options here. Is revenue and margin, are those issues for you? Lack of business, with COVID going on, that's a common issue that's been going on. Partnership issues, are you struggling to find the right partner? Are there knowledge gaps in your engineering team? Staffing issues? I mean, as an MSP, there's a ton of potential challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis, and just kind of interested in seeing, what's the biggest challenge that you're facing today. I'm pretty sure I know how this one's gonna pan out, but I've been surprised in the past. So we'll go ahead and let that run for just a few more seconds here. See a couple of responses coming in. And yeah, it's pretty much lining up exactly how I figured it would. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now, and let's share the results. So this is exactly what I figured would turn out. So we got revenue and margins. 43% of attendees saying that revenue and margins are the biggest concern, which, you know, doesn't surprise me. Like I said, especially with COVID going on right now, revenue and margins are a big struggle, making sure you get enough business. Staff issues, 14%. Knowledge gaps, yep. With the rate of change in the industry right now, that's definitely always a concern, especially when you're trying to pivot your MSP into something like a CSP, right? To change from those on-premises offerings into more of a cloud, you know, PaaS, SaaS-based model for your business. So I can definitely see knowledge gaps being a concern as well. So appreciate everyone's feedback on that. That's great feedback. And let's step through the rest of the presentation. So let's talk a little bit more about those MSP struggles. So, you know, again, these types of presentations, I always like to start with some information. So we started with a poll. Let's talk about some cloud statistics now. And we've provided some sourcing for this information as well. So you see, as we step through the column on the right-hand side here, we got source 451, Cisco report linker. A lot of these sources came from the 2 URLs listed in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. So starting with the top one here from 451, we see that 60% of workloads were running on a hosted cloud service in 2019, which is up from 45% in 2018. So we've seen 15% growth in 2019. Now we're in 2020, which, you know, you can imagine that's gone up even more since then. So obviously, as we all know and we've all heard, growth of cloud is, you know, happening at a rapid pace. Then from Cisco, 2 interesting data points from them. You know, cloud data centers are going to process 90% or 94% of workloads in 2021. 94% of workloads are going to be processed in cloud data centers. 75% of all cloud workloads and compute instances will be SaaS by 2021. So you think about that. How long have we been running virtual machines inside of data centers? 13, 14, 15 years by my counts. Yeah, I've been in the MSP space in some way, shape, or form for about 15 years now. You know, in an engineering capacity, in a marketing capacity, in a sales capacity, account management. And the one thing that's been constant throughout, you know, that time has been virtual machines. And to see that changing here, so 75% of all cloud workloads and compute instances will be SaaS by 2021 it's kind of an eye opener, right? So it's definitely something to keep your eye on the ball as, you know, you pivot and change your business and grow your business over the coming year here. Another interesting data point here from Report Linker, global cloud compute market is expected to reach 623.3 billion by 2023. That is a chunk of change. So definitely that market is growing, and the opportunity for service providers to take advantage of that is growing as well. A couple more statistics here on the next page. So these are relevant service provider statistics, again with a source there on the bottom. Spiceworks always does a state of IT report every year. There's always a great, you know, amount of data contained inside of their report, and these 4 points were pulled from that report there. So if you're interested in checking that out. So 44% of businesses plan to increase tech spend in 2022 versus 38% last year. So despite COVID-19, more businesses are planning to increase their tech spending than last year. 1 in 4 enterprises are increasing 2020 spend due to a security incident. So as we know, security, the need for it has just grown, especially as workloads are starting to move outside the 4 walls of a business. You know, as IT moves into the cloud and different cloud offerings and models, you know, the need for security has grown. And I think the industry as a whole they've stepped up to that challenge. You know, but it's up to end customers and partners and cloud solution providers to step up and leverage those tools that have been made available to make sure everyone stays secure. AI powered tech and adoption is expected to triple by 2021. So AI, there's I don't think there's any disputing that AI is a big topic especially in the Microsoft space in the last couple of years. Microsoft has made huge investments in AI and their Azure platform. So definitely no surprise to see that one. 2/3 of large enterprises are planning to deploy 5G by 2021, and the big driving thing I see behind that is IoT. IoT is just a huge exploding market, and 5G is part of that. So, when I look at these 4 bullet points, the one on the top left about tech spend being increased, I can kind of set that one to the side in comparison to the other 4. I mean, budgets, a budget is going to be talked about every year from any organization, right? But the other 3, the green one, the blue one, and the purple one on the screen here, all of these have something to do with cloud in some way, shape, or form. All the newest security enhancements are happening in the cloud. AI, all those investments are happening in cloud services. And 5G, like I said, is being driven by IoT, which hooks into the cloud as its primary management and data mechanism. So the cloud is a huge part of all of these data points moving forward. And then if we step further, we're talking about the impact of MSPs. Let's talk about COVID-19. I mean, it's kind of, you can't get through a single day lately, at least here in the States, without, hearing something about coronavirus, right? So it's definitely been a challenge for service providers throughout the world, especially traditional MSPs. So as we know, businesses scramble to set up remote connectivity. Some businesses were better at that than others. Some were more prepared than others. Many primarily on-prem organizations and their MSPs, they really struggled to kind of make that transition in some cases. A lot of businesses were caught with their pants down because they were primarily on-premises type deployments, right? Those already living in the cloud, or at least partially, they were able to kind of more roll with the punches, right? They were already kind of set up and configured for remote work. So people just went home and just continued life as normal. They just continued about their workday, and not a whole lot changed. I will say that the traditional MSP sales model was severely tested by coronavirus. So, when I say traditional MSP sales model, I'm thinking, large hardware sales, primarily project driven with on-premises technology. Like I said, your traditional MSP as we've known it for the last 10 or 15 years. That sales model was really tested, and I think a lot of people saw a big hit to their revenue, and all, along the same points, they saw a big hit to their profit as a result of that as well. Long-term multi-year contracts proved to be inflexible for a number of end customers. So, I've seen this, this big trend in the last probably 10 to 15 years of service providers, wanting that recurring revenue. And I mean, don't get me wrong, recurring revenue is king, right? I mean, you want to make sure that you have that revenue coming in every month, but I've seen where a lot of service providers are wanting to put these 3 and sometimes 5-year contracts in place on their clients for, X number of dollars per workstation or per server per month or per user. And, a lot of these organizations that were hit really hard by COVID, they're taking a look at those contracts, in a heavy downturn like this, and they're really questioning them. In some cases, the break in those contracts, we found that inflexibility is in those contracts has been a detriment to some MSPs. Not all, but some. And then I kind of mentioned this already, hardware sales really kind of froze for many. I mean, I think about back here, at least in the States in March is when COVID really hit. And I mean, all spending just poof, stop, full stop on all projects, all hardware sales, just poof, it all stopped, right? March and April, I think, were the two months, and that was really a big struggle for a lot of folks, right? A lot of MSPs really struggle with that because hardware can be, not a huge chunk of your monthly revenue, but it's a part of it, right? And you don't want to lose any part of your monthly revenue. So Altero did a COVID-19 impact survey to see how service providers have been kind of rolling with COVID. How has it affected them? One of the key data points from that survey, and a little bit later in the webinar today, we've got a link to the survey if you're interested in taking a look at it. But one of the key data points here is that nearly 60% of MSPs have seen a negative impact on revenue. 60% have seen a negative impact. I would suspect that the ones that saw an increase were the organizations that were already primed and ready to leverage cloud services, to sell cloud services to their customers. So yeah, definitely. I think those that were prepared to set up and enable remote work and remote collaboration and remote connectivity, those are probably the ones that ended up with the revenue increases during this whole thing. Next interesting data point here is, what do you see with your best revenue generating opportunities, if any, during the pandemic? And again, key responses, those people that were doing remote work enablement, that were enabling cloud computing for their customers, they saw as the best revenue generating opportunities. And I think another important point here is the close third is security as a service. Like I mentioned, as the IT infrastructure for any organization moves outside of the four walls of that organization, security becomes even more important than it already was, right? So it's no surprise to me that that was a close third, and then backup as a service as a close fourth, because that kind of plays hand in hand with security, right? Especially when we talk about things like ransomware. So definitely a lot of interesting points here, and just kind of reinforces the idea that, hey, the cloud is where things are going. That's where the money's moving, and from your end customer perspective, that's where things should be moving as well. All right, so I got a couple of comments and questions coming in here. Before we move on, I'm going to take a quick look at this. Let's see. We've got Trevor saying we've never tried to lock customers into contracts. I consider them unreasonable and poor value to clients that can't help but drive a wedge through the relationship. I think it's a good thing this is being reviewed at a large scale. Definitely agree, Trevor. Definitely agree. I mean, I get I get the need and the want to have that, consistent recurring revenue coming in every month. But I don't know, just my personal philosophy, I feel like you as the service provider, it's on you to do great work, to provide tons of value, to the point to where they keep coming back month to month without requiring that long-term contract, right? That's just kind of my personal philosophy. And then also from Trevor, another comment here. Yes, we've seen an increase in business over the past 4 months. Transitioning clients to remote work was straightforward. Yep, definitely. I've talked to a lot of folks and a lot of different service providers that, remote work enabling remote work over the last couple of months has generated a lot of business. So yes, definitely agree. Any of you, if you have any other insights or thoughts or questions, feel free to hop in the questions form, and I'll get to them as I can. Other than that, let's move on. What is a CSP? So a CSP stands for Cloud Solution Provider, not Cloud Service Provider, like I've caught myself almost saying a few times during this webinar. A Cloud Solution Provider, as far as Microsoft is concerned, is a Microsoft partner that provides Azure and M365 services. That's it in a nutshell. A cloud service provider, as far as the industry considers it, is those companies that are providing cloud platforms, like Microsoft provides Azure, Amazon provides AWS, etc. So a cloud solution provider is what a CSP is. And really what it is, it's about more than just providing Azure and M365 services. Really what a cloud solution provider does, and what good cloud solution providers do, is they take their unique value add. What is it that makes them unique as a service provider? What special value add, what special knowledge do they have? They take that and they roll that into those Azure and M365 services. And the other thing that I feel really strongly about with cloud solution providers, and this kind of surprises some people sometimes when I say this, is that I see a CSP as knowing what level of cloud is applicable for a given customer. Now, some people say, well, I'm a cloud solution provider. It should be 100% cloud. I don't know if I agree with 100% cloud. For some organizations, it makes complete sense, right? You get a customer who's completely 100% cloud native. The flexibility, the scalability of that is amazing. Not all organizations can do that, though. Realistically, most of your customer engagements are going to be some sort of hybrid deployment. They're going to have some stuff that remains on-prem. They're going to have some stuff in the cloud. You know, don't put yourself in the box of trying to only do 100% cloud. It works great, but it doesn't work great for every customer, right? Don't try and jam a square peg in a round hole, right? So that's the other big thing I feel about CSPs is that they really need to know and learn, and they kind of know where that on-prem world and the cloud intersect. They operate in that space. So how do I become a CSP? Well, it's really a three-step process, and it's fairly simple, and you can get all this information at partner.microsoft.com. I actually intended to put that link on the slide here, but looks like I forgot about that. But basically, again, it's partner.microsoft.com. You go there, you join the Microsoft Partner Network. There's a whole process around that. Then you enroll in the CSP program, and then you connect with an indirect provider for additional assistance. Now, people are asking, well, Andy, what the heck is an indirect provider? An indirect provider would be another Microsoft partner that can assist you in providing those cloud services. So that'd be like an Ingram Micro or a Synix or Tech Data, you know, some sort of distributor like that, or any other number of Microsoft partners. And really what it is, it's to help you, you know, kind of round out that whole portfolio, that entire offering to your end customer. So really it's a fairly easy three-step process. So let's talk about MSP versus CSP. I'm just seeing how we are on time. I want to make sure that we leave some time for questions at the end. So MSP versus CSP. This is really what you guys are here to listen about today. I want to start this with a disclaimer because I know a lot of, excuse me, a lot of businesses, a lot of MSP owners, they put their sweat, blood, tears, they've worked hard for years and years to get their MSP where it is. You know, I started filling out some of the subsequent slides in the slide deck, and I just felt like I'm like, oh, people are going to think I'm ragging on MSPs, and I'm not. You know, I'm taking, you know, I'm taking facts and opinions and kind of formulating comparisons here. And I just wanted to put this disclaimer here saying, hey, all MSPs are different, and a lot of MSPs have started their transition to the cloud. Many haven't. So really the key points in this section here in the next couple of slides, they're in reference to MSPs that really are traditional MSPs that have focused on premises, have focused on, you know, hardware sales and that type of thing. It really focused on those MSPs that haven't even started that cloud transition yet. So I just kind of wanted to get out in front of that here before I go into the next couple of slides. So really, like I said, we're looking at the differences between MSPs and CSPs. And what I wanted to do here is kind of a high level comparison. So I've got MSPs here in the left-hand column. I've got CSPs in the right-hand side. What are some of the key differences here? So I've mentioned this a few times already. You know, an MSP will traditionally focus on, you know, the on-premises technologies. You know, SAN, you know, the one big thing that's back in my MSP days, you know, we always used to call it the special of the week. Of course, it was always the special of the week, and that was 2 hosts and a SAN, right? 2 hosts and a SAN. You know, just I can't tell you how many times I was involved in a project or involved in selling that solution. 2 hosts and a SAN on premises. So traditionally, you know, MSPs have always focused on, you know, those on-premises technologies and deployments like that. Conversely, a cloud solution provider, they will lead with cloud first and hybrid second. Notice I didn't put on-premises here. Cloud first and hybrid second. I'm a firm believer, you know, like I said earlier, you know, that cloud solution providers should also work with on-premises, but I also believe that, you know, the cloud can work in some way, shape, or form for every organization on the planet. There's some sort of value that the cloud can provide for any organization. And it's your job as the cloud solution provider to, what is that value? You know, if you come to a customer or you have an existing customer that says, I don't want to use the cloud, it doesn't provide any value for me, you know, I don't want to use it, I don't trust it. I challenge you as the provider to find that one little nugget, that one little area where the cloud can provide value for that customer. Usually, you think of things like the low-hanging fruit, right? Like backup and disaster recovery, or you look at collaboration tools. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a little bit, but cloud first, you always lead with cloud. Hybrid cloud is your second. MSPs, they've had a large dependence on hardware and associated services. So again, traditionally an MSP will go to a customer and say, hey, you have this business need. Here's a hardware solution that addresses it, or an on-premises installed software solution that addresses it. Let's set up a project. Let's write a statement of work. Let's get all around. Let's go and actually do the project. That's traditionally how MSPs have done things. A cloud solution provider is, they're going to go through the same processes of generating a statement of work, going through the sales cycle, but they're going to leverage SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS more heavily than hardware. The on-premises hardware is going to be, probably the distant fourth choice in that list. Managed services providers, they tend to be tied to break fix, or like I mentioned earlier, those per user, per device contracts. Whereas the cloud solution provider is more tied to the services that the business needs. So think about that for a second. An MSP, we're focusing on either each user or we're focusing on the device. Whereas the solution provider focuses more on, like I said, the services, the tools. So I'm thinking, Office 365, all the services there. Teams is the big one that comes to mind when I think about this. You get an organization tied in and using that platform. If you're the provider who is enabling them to get more done, I'm going to quote Microsoft's vision here a little bit. If you're the provider that's helping that organization achieve more through collaborative services and cloud services through Microsoft, that customer is going to be a little bit more sticky, I would say, with you, without necessarily even having to be in a contract, right? Because they're leveraging those services in the Microsoft Cloud Stack. You're the provider that's enabling that. And like I said, just by virtue of being the expert, providing that value, helping that customer realize the value that's contained in the Microsoft Cloud Platform, that, like I said, that really makes the customer sticky. Typically slower to implement on the managed services side. That's been a common issue. So you think about, again, I'm thinking about hardware, large hardware installation projects. Think about the time to implement there. You have to order the solution. You have to wait for it to arrive. You have to unbox it. You have to rack it. You have to connect it. You have to handle, there's just so many different portions of that, right? Let's say the example I always come up with here is, let's say if a customer come to you and say, hey, I want a really beefy SQL server, and it can't be virtualized because of a vendor application requirement or whatever reason, right? Maybe that's a bad example because that doesn't really happen anymore. But let's just say they wanted to deploy a huge physical SQL box. Again, you have to wait for all those things to happen. Whereas with cloud, if I have Azure at my fingertips, which as a CSP you would, you just give me a SQL server. 5 minutes later, oh, here's your SQL server, right? The flexibility, the speed of deployment that the cloud provides is fantastic. Managed services providers are, and this doesn't apply to all MSPs, but in my experience, I found that the traditional MSP is a little bit resistant to change. And I cover more about the sales organization differences in the next slide, but I found that a lot of the resistance to change comes from the sales organization. But conversely, on this cloud solution provider side, what I found is that those organizations that are either born a CSP or they've pivoted to it, they're used to rolling with the punches. They're used to that rapid change. And that's actually a huge benefit. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more why here in just a second. So I wanted to talk about the sales mentality specifically. And it's really a key distinction here between these two organizations. I found that on the managed service side, like I've mentioned several times already, they tend to be very project and hardware driven. Whereas a cloud solution provider is going to look at leveraging long-term recurring sales, leveraging that recurring Azure monthly revenue, that Office 365 monthly revenue. I found that in the MSP side, sales staff, they're often pursuing that large commission check. Like I mentioned earlier, 2 hosts and a SAN, right? You think about the amount of money wrapped up in just 2 hosts and a SAN. You're probably looking at, let's be conservative here. You're probably looking at least 10,000 for each host, and you're probably looking at about 20,000 for the SAN, right? And then maybe if they don't have any existing iSCSI or fiber channel switches, you're probably looking at another $5,000 each there for good ones. That's a $50,000 sale, you know? So I mean, you know, traditionally, if you're a sales person who is really tied to commission, that looks really appealing, right? As opposed to the cloud solution provider side, which is more of a slow burn. So really, if you've got a lot of sales staff that are already really kind of ingrained in the MSP side here, or they're often after that large commission check, it can be a shock. It can be a hard transition to make to, and I have to say convince, because really it takes some convincing to say, hey, you're not going to have those huge, you might have some, but you're not going to have as many of those huge, large commission checks anymore. It's going to be more of a consistent, slow burn. Personally, myself, I like the consistent, slow burn as opposed to the up, down that you get with the traditional sales model, but that's just me. Moving on the list here, you know, an MSP is more apt to potentially provide a solution that isn't a 100% fit. Again, this doesn't apply to all service providers. You know, I know this doesn't apply to all MSPs. I know a lot of great MSPs that won't do this, but I've found just in my own experience that it seems to be more prevalent in the MSP space than the CSP space. And really, it's kind of tied to that above point, right? You know, a salesperson might be really driven to get that large commission check, and maybe as a result, they don't necessarily sell the right solution, which is unfortunate. The cloud lends itself well to only providing what's needed. You know, there's flexibility in cloud to only provide what's absolutely needed for the end customer. Moving on, you know, the end customers, they understand on-prem. They've been using on-prem for years and years already. Thus, the sales cycle is shorter. I mean, you know, customers know that, hey, you know, I need to refresh my environment every 3 years or every 5 years or whatever it is, right? And they get that. They understand that cycle because they've been doing it. Whereas when you pivot over into becoming a cloud solution provider, now the sales cycle can get longer because now you have to, you know, you have to justify the use of cloud. You have to explain it. You have to, you know, I don't see that being a forever thing, but certainly, you know, right now where we're at in the industry, that initial sales cycle can be longer moving over to the cloud solution provider side. And then, you know, going back to that bullet point I made on the last slide about flexibility. So time between same customer sales can be long in the MSP model. So you, again, I'm going to use that same example, 2 hosts and a SAN. You're going to go sell that to a customer. They're not going to need 2 hosts and a SAN probably for another 3 to 5 years at least. Some go longer, right? Whereas in the cloud, the rate of change in the cloud really enables a lot of conversations to happen. I mean, how many times, you know, have you logged into the Azure portal? And maybe some of you haven't. I'll use my own experience here. It seems like every week I log into the Azure portal, there's something new. Hey, this feature's out of beta, or hey, this feature is now in public preview, or there's something new coming out almost on a weekly basis, sometimes daily, that can enable at least a conversation with your end customers. You know, hey, this new feature came out. It's going to provide you A, B, and C. It's going to provide this type of value. It's going to help you do this. It's a great conversation for you to have with your end customers, and you know, really provide an opportunity for more sales. So let's talk about the benefits of a CSP model. So a lot of people, you know, one of the first questions that comes up is how much margin? Typically, and again, this can vary based on region, based on partner status. There's a lot of variables here, but typically what I've seen is a range from 15 to 20%. Now, a lot of people will look at that and say, 15 to 20% it's not a lot, Andy. That's not a ton of margin. And I'm going to get into that more in a little bit when we talk about bundling services, but that's what the typical margin is for Azure services, O365, and Dynamics 365. You get access to MS partner resources, so partner support, partner marketing materials, you know, account management services, through Microsoft. There's a ton of great resources available through Microsoft as a CSP. You get back-end incentives. So typically Microsoft will they'll define some goals or a particular type of deployment or license or sale that they want to see. You as a CSP, if you have the option of making those types of sale, you can get some back-end incentives, which it's not a whole lot different than what's that stuff's been in the partner program for a while, but definitely seeing an uptick in it on the CSP side. You get industry recognition. CSP is kind of the new norm as far as service providers go. I've talked to a lot of end customers that have been looking for a CSP specifically. It seems like CSP is becoming, I don't want to say more accepted, but more common in the customer's eyes than MSP, at least in my experience. And then you got a robust and growing community. I found that the CSP community is very embracing. And it ties into that larger Microsoft community, which over the last several years has really grown. It's really matured, and it's a great community to be part of. Sorry, just had to grab a drink there. All right, next slide here. So the one thing that I think is really powerful about being a CSP is that your potential market's going to grow as a CSP. You think about those hardware projects, typically they're regional, right? Just because you have to get there, you have to install it, you have to set it up. As a CSP, your reach is the whole globe if you want it to be. So your market is going to grow. You can target, organizations and prospects that are far beyond your typical reach. That includes, anywhere that there's connectivity. You can leverage things like Azure Stack and Azure Edge Computing, Microsoft 365. There is a whole breadth of services contained and part of the CSP program that will enable you to really extend your reach. Azure can be leveraged anywhere. I mentioned Azure Stack, so Azure Stack and Azure Edge Computing, they have a whole range of devices. So if you have a customer that's, maybe they're disconnected, maybe they're in a disconnected scenario, but they still want access to some cloud capabilities, Azure Stack's a solution for that. I mean, heck, they even showcased a version of Azure Stack at Microsoft Ignite last year, where it was Azure Stack in a backpack with wireless connectivity. So it was a ruggedized version of Azure Stack, so you could have cloud computing and services remotely in the wilderness for like rescue operations and things like that, for piloting and running drones and gathering data. There's just a ton of different options here as far as geography and deploying things go. So let's talk about CSP services and offerings. And again, just checking my time here. Core offerings as part of a cloud solution provider really boils down to three things. And by no means, this is not the only offerings you can do, but it's your core offerings as a CSP. First one being Azure. So running virtual machines in Azure as IaaS. You got your PaaS services like Azure SQL, web apps. There's a whole slew of others. AI and IoT. I wanted to call those out specifically because it's kind of that's part of Azure that I really see growing right now. That's where a lot of the investments are happening. You think of what it would take for you to build your own AI services, your own IoT services, and the costs are just astronomical. So as a Microsoft Cloud partner, you can leverage the investments that Microsoft has made in those technologies and deploy them and use them with your end customers. So definitely, I suggest you take a look at those. A lot of power, a lot of value in those features. You got Microsoft 365, for collaboration. Your typical Microsoft Office suite tools. Teams is the big one. Teams is absolutely huge right now, which I'm sure a lot of people know. So Teams is the big one in collaboration. SharePoint, I've seen a big uptick in SharePoint Online as well. Security is a huge part of Microsoft 365. As you think about the identity services contained in Azure AD, you've got endpoint management. So there's all kinds of great identity and security services in the EMS suite as well in the Microsoft 365. Just a ton of value that you can provide with your end customers as part of the M365 suite. And then Dynamics 365. There's a ton of value here if you have the expertise in-house to do it. So this includes things like Dynamics Business Central, Dynamics CRM. There's a whole slew of different Dynamics 365 products here. I found that the two I've listed here are the most common. Again, there's a ton of value in these, and typically what I found is the margin on the Dynamics side is a little bit higher than it is for Azure and 365. So if you've got the know-how in-house to do Dynamics 365, it's definitely a great place to get into, especially for conversations with customers about things like, CRM deployments and ERP and all that type of stuff. So definitely check that out if you are interested. There are some specializations. So you got Microsoft Gov and education specializations. They may line up with your vertical. I know a lot of organizations, they target a specific vertical, but it's possible to become an authorized partner in one or both of those areas. It allows you to reach a customer base that you've not been able to service before if you don't have those specializations and you get them. And it can also provide varying revenue, but the additional options are not a bad thing. So there's good revenue in Gov. EDU space is a little bit different because you've got some nonprofit pricing in there. But I know a lot of providers that operate solely in the education space, and they do very well for themselves. So some additional options there. Typical margins and the power of bundling. So don't underestimate the power of the platform. And really, what I'm getting to here is we're getting back to that conversation about margin. And again, people are going to be like, 15 to 20% margin isn't that much, but really the program is designed to allow you to bundle in your services and your unique value add, as I mentioned earlier. And those good CSPs will do that. They'll bundle in their services into the core offerings that I just mentioned. That could include subject matter expertise. That could include value as you, the partner, managing the platform for the end customer. It could also include bundled third-party applications. So what I see a lot of organizations do is, they'll tack on some extra services to the typical monthly cost of Azure or the typical monthly cost of O365. For example, let's say you're providing Office 365 to an end customer, and you tack on an extra 10 points, and you also bundle in backup services, for example. I see a lot of bundling stuff like that going. What it does is it really allows you to put together a holistic package that you get really good margin on and provides a ton of value for your client. So for example, Altero provides a ton of really good backup solutions for various workloads. So get Altero endpoint backup to back up the various endpoints in any given environment. In the example I just gave about Office 365 services, you could bundle an Altero Office 365 backup to provide backup and data recovery services for that Office 365 tenant that you just set up for an end customer. We got Altero VM backup. So if you have a customer still running virtual machines on premises and you're putting together a holistic hybrid cloud management solution, you could include that in your offering. And again, HCI support is now available in the Altero suite of products as well. So if any of you watched the Microsoft Inspire event, Azure Stack HCI is officially a product now. Microsoft or Altero is one of the very first backup providers to actually support that platform. So definitely, if you have anyone who's looking at Azure Stack HCI, Altero can back it up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hop out to a live demo really quick. I just want to show you the single pane of glass power that's contained in the Altero suite of products here. So like I said, you go to an end customer, you sell them, Office 365 or whatever cloud services you're providing them, and then you can bundle in your backup services on top of that, or whatever other services you want to bundle in. Maybe you want to put cost management into that offering as well. You have the option of doing that. That's what the platform provides and what it enables. So definitely a lot of power in bundling. So again, like I said, we're just kind of starting with the Altero suite of products here. So I've logged into what's called the Altero CMC, the Cloud Management Console. This is your single pane of glass for providing these services to your end customers. What I've done here is I've logged into manage.altero.com. And what it'll do when you log in there is it'll give you 4 boxes, one for each suite and one for each offering in the suite.
What I did is I just logged into the VM backup management piece of it first. So this would be like an example. I have an end customer that's still running virtual machines on premises. I want to provide backup services for those virtual machines, and I could manage that entire solution from here. So if I have multiple customers running this, they all show up here. I can take a look at all the different Altero installations that I'm managing across my customer base. The other really cool thing I like about this, and it's probably my favorite feature in the CMC here, little thing, but I really like it, is you have the option of upgrading each Altero instance right from this single pane of glass. It just makes upgrades super easy. But the other thing about this web portal, based on some of versus some of Altero's competitors, is that you can actually do backup and recovery related stuff from this portal. So if I wanted to, I could log in here and I could fire off a backup if I wanted to. So let's say I want to run a backup on this Debian virtual machine. I can actually fire off a backup, and it will actually start running here on the dashboard. So that'll show up here, and yep, just a second. So there it goes. Alternatively, like I said, there's other solutions in the suite. So like the example I gave, let's say I'm selling Office 365 services to a customer, and I want to provide backup and recovery services for that Office 365 stuff as well. I could bundle in Altero Office 365 backup. So same thing here, very similar look and feel to the VM backup solution we just showed you. Same website, same single pane of glass here. I can manage all of my different customers and all the different O365 tenants that are part of them. I can actually back up individual mailboxes and OneDrive accounts. I can back up SharePoint files. I can recover all of those. I can do a granular restore. The other nice thing here is that there's a lot of nice reports built into this portal as well. So I can see what the subscription billing looks like over time. And then finally, one of the newest add-ons to the Altero suite of products here is the endpoint backup solution. So the example use case I always give here is, hey, what if we have the CEO wants his laptop backed up or something? You have some important endpoints that need to be backed up. That's really what the solution is designed for. And again, you can manage that solution all through the single pane of glass, just like you would all the others. And again, this really enables you to bundle in those value add service, create that holistic IT package for your end customers. So with that, I'm going to head back to the slide deck. And let's start working through our last section here. Another question here from Trevor, is that upgrading the software or upgrading the account? That is actually upgrading the software on the installed instance of Altero. Yep, so that button will actually upgrade the instance of Altero on the machine that it's installed on. So super useful. It's not interruptive too, which is also nice. So especially in the case if it's a VM backup install that's installed directly on a Hyper-V host, you don't want that thing rebooting in the middle of the day. So it doesn't do that, which is nice. All right, how to migrate current services. This is the first point I always start with. If you're gonna do it, you have to do it. I've talked to so many people that have talked about pivoting into the CSP model, and I talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, and it never happens. And like I said earlier, that sales team is usually the big anchor that you're trying to pull and take care of, right? If you can convince your sales team, typically there's no problems. But again, if you're gonna do it, you have to do it. Let's move on here. Practical steps. What does it look like from start to finish? So if I'm an MSP and I start pivoting to CSP, this is at least the basic steps in my mind. Any new deal that comes in the door, I'm going to lead with cloud. Again, hybrid seconds. I mentioned that earlier. Lead with cloud, hybrid seconds. Then you're going to start with something simple, right? You're going to start with that low-hanging fruit service that will be easy to get them into the cloud. And I always joke that the cloud is like crack, right? It's like a drug. You start with a little bit, you get a little taste of it, and pretty soon you're in an alley somewhere with a needle in your arm that's labeled cloud, and you can't stop, right? That's my running joke anyway. So you always start with the low-hanging fruits. That's things like backup and DR. Those are easy things to move up into the cloud. So in the case of Altero, you could utilize the cloud as cloud storage. So let's say you have a customer whose backup storage is growing beyond the bounds of what they have on premises. You could leverage the cloud as a storage target for the offsite backups, which is a huge help. M365 is also a great starting service. I found that when people start leveraging all the collaborative tools that are contained in the M365 suites, or if you're talking to an end customer IT department, I found the really big hooking point is the EMS suite and all the security features that are contained in it. Those serve to be really good starting points for getting a customer started on their cloud journey. So then after your initial successes, start planning what's next. What's the next thing that's going to move to cloud, and the next, and the next. And then continue to make those services moves. That makes sense. Again, your customer may have some workloads that don't make sense in the cloud. Maybe you have a latency sensitive application, or maybe the customer has some sort of regulatory compliance reasons that they can't move that particular thing out into the cloud. Or maybe they're using CAD or some really graphically heavy application. There's a couple of different reasons why you wouldn't move a workload to the cloud, but continue to move those that make sense, and that makes sense for the customer's business. And then once you've gotten to that point to where the client is heavily invested in the cloud, now start leveraging those more advanced features. Start looking at the AI features. Start looking at Power Platform. Start looking at IoT. What of the advanced features inside of the M365 and the Azure suite of services can you start leveraging to provide even more value for that end customer? Key services to start with. I've kind of covered a lot of this already. These are your foot in the door services, backup, Azure Site Recovery if you're looking for DR, Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Stream. This is kind of one that surprises people when I bring it up, because it's just like, well, isn't that just like a YouTube service, Andy? Well, it is kind of YouTube service, but it's a YouTube service for the business. And I found what wows a lot of customers is that if I walk into a meeting with them, or I get on a Teams call with them, and I use the record functionality inside of Teams, what that does is it will automatically upload to Stream, and then I can go to my customer and say, hey, here's a recording of that meeting we just had in case you need to go back and reference anything. That really is kind of an aha moment for most customers that says, hey, there's a lot of value here, especially in the case of busy schedules. Maybe some people that wanted to be in the meeting couldn't. Now they can go back and see what was talked about in that meeting. Stream also has transcription capabilities as well. So, if somebody talked about a particular project that they're part of, they couldn't make the meeting, they can search that transcription for mention of that project and then go straight to that section of the meeting that talked about what was relevant to them. So there's a lot of power in Stream as well. I definitely recommend you take a look at. Get your traditional Office applications. OneDrive for Business and SharePoint are both huge enablers as well, especially OneDrive for Business, and the whole concept of having your files on any device you log into is really huge. And once you're established, like I said, look at those advanced features. The EMS suite I mentioned, ATP is another big one. If you want to leverage some of the advanced security features, DLP and governance is huge right now. The DLP features, making sure that sensitive data doesn't get sent off site. The governance features like PIM. PIM is a really cool feature in that, you can really kind of control privileged access within your IT environment, right? Things like just-in-time access. So let's say, I'm a junior admin and I need to log into a particular server. I have to go ask a senior admin to give me just-in-time access to that server so I can log in for 20 minutes and then the access is revoked. It kind of provides a lot of unique features like that for your customers. Azure Identity Protection is a huge one. Azure Identity Protection, what it does is it kind of scans the deep web for credential dumps. And if it finds something that kind of matches up with something inside your Azure AD environment, it'll notify you and you can take actions based on those alerts. You get the AI and business intelligence capabilities as well. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of advanced features to look at. We actually did another webinar earlier this year on the security features inside of O365 and M365. I put a link to that webinar here. You can click on that and watch that on demand when you want to for some more examples of advanced features. Useful certifications for your team. So as you get roped into down the CSP route, I'd have your team start looking at these certifications. AZ900 and MS900 are your starting points. And then there are various branches based off of what the intended specialization is. We did an Azure certifications webinar, another webinar earlier this year as well, with a good buddy of mine, Mike Bender. And that was just a wealth of information in that webinar. We also included the recent Azure certification changes in that webinar as well. So definitely check that out if you're interested. And we get to our wrap up and Q&A. Again, if you have questions or just a comment that you want to share with the group, or feel free to put it in the questions form while I walk through the last couple of bits here. So, I mentioned Altero Backup Solutions a lot throughout this webinar. If you want to sign up for a 30-day trial, you can go to altero.com/MSP-solutions and then drill down into the specific Altero offering that you're interested in. Or you can just contact Altero at support@altero.com or sales@altero.com. Altero also has live chat. The support guys at Altero are fantastic. They do a great job. They've been known to answer known to answer a whole slew of questions over chat if you're interested. And also there's phone numbers there available as well. So I want to do one more poll here. Now that you've seen the CSP model, what is most appealing to you? What part of it do you find appealing? So I'm going to go ahead and launch this. I'll have you guys go ahead and fill that out. So a couple of different options here. Is the margin appealing? Are the services, Azure or M365, are those appealing? The scalability, the flexibility, hybrid offerings, is the partnership opportunities? What is it about the CSP model that you find appealing? We'll give folks a couple of minutes here to do that. All right. Yep, this one's turning out exactly how I figured it would as well. So we'll give that a few more seconds here. One question here from Brandon: how does Altero fit in when data is stored in Azure? So the data stored in Azure is stored in GDPR compliant data centers. So it's just basically you set up a storage account inside of Azure. Let me back up for a second. Depending on the solution that you're using, the Office 365 backup solution automatically stores it inside of GDPR compliant data center hosting that Altero manages. If you are using VM backup on premises, you have the option of setting up a storage account inside of Azure in whatever data center region you want to set it up in, and then you can send your offsite backups there. Hopefully that covers the question. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results, and then I'll get to the other questions that have popped up here in just a second. So yeah, this is pretty much what I expected. Scalability and the flexibility of the cloud is huge. There's no arguing against that. If I want a SQL server, boom, there it is. If I want a web app, boom, there it is. It's so simple and easy. Azure M365 service is next, and then we've got the various margins. Everything else is 5% after that. So pretty much what I expected. So from there, let me hide that and then we'll move on. I know we are running short on time, so we'll move on to the next slide, which is the Q&A slide. So again, if you haven't gotten your questions in, feel free to click that button there and get your questions in. I know I've covered a lot of them as they've come in, but I want to step through here and see if there are any others. Let's see. So am I aware of any industry concern around the Earn It Act and the Lawful Access to Encrypted Data Act? This sort of retrograde anti-security legislation has a lot of businesses moving to the cloud very concerned. Do I hear chatter about that within the industry and Microsoft? I haven't heard a whole lot about that, to be honest. I know for those that are trying to get those types of laws passed, it's a very uphill battle because obviously, the organizations like Microsoft and Google and AWS, they're going to lobby against that very hard, and they're going to lobby against it with all of their millions and millions of dollars and billions of dollars, right? So, the circles that I'm in, I haven't heard a lot of concern about that. Obviously there are some people that are concerned about it, but I haven't seen it being a roadblock to any bit of cloud adoption. That's just my opinion, what I've heard. Hopefully that helps. Let's see. So Brandon's just clarifying here, should have been more specific. If your data and services are in Azure, how does Altero fit in to back up this? Gotcha. So you're asking if you are running services in Azure and O365, how does it? So today Altero can back up services in O365 if you're running virtual machines in Azure and you're looking to back up virtual machines running in Azure, that's on Altero's roadmap currently. So I don't have any timelines for that, but I know it's on the roadmap and it's actually being worked on. So if you're looking to back up virtual machines in Azure with Altero, you will be able to just sometime down the road. So I think that's what you were getting at, Brandon. If not, just send me another message there. Let's see. How does Dynamics 365 fit into the suite of offerings? Dynamics is kind of its own animal, I found. So whereas O365 and Azure, they're very much on the infrastructure side, I've found in my experience that Dynamics 365 is very much I don't know, I want to say more of a dev/ERP thing. You really have to have that specialized expertise inside of your environment. But if you're an organization that's kind of considering that, it really kind of depends on your target and customer as well. If you're targeting SMBs and stuff like that, not a lot of value there. But if your primary customer or the target customer that you want to go after are like large enterprises, large manufacturers, large organizations, you may want to look at putting Dynamics expertise into your skill set. Even if it's just one, it doesn't have to be the whole suite. Could just be one area. It could just be Business Central. It could just be CRM. Just having that when you're working with those larger organizations really enables you to, kind of provide the IT needs of the entire organization, right? So, good question there. Let's see if we got any others here. All right, looks like that covers it. I know we're coming up to time here. We got just another slide or two, a little bit, one more piece of information and another resource I want to send over to you. We recently had a good buddy of mine, Eric Siren. He wrote this new ebook called The Backup Bible. So the complete guide to protecting your data. Talks about getting started with DR planning and identifying risks and priorities and RPOs and RTOs and all that good stuff, and how to translate your business plan into a technically oriented plan as well, oriented outlook. So you'll be getting a copy of that sent to you. Fantastic little ebook on backup services there. And then I mentioned earlier that COVID-19 impact study. So, I kind of shared some of the findings there. If you want to take, a 5-minute survey, if you want to provide your input there, and if you want to see the entire survey results, we've got the link right here. Again, the link is not spelled out, but you will be getting a copy of the slide deck, as well as a link to the recording of this webinar if you want to watch it later. But yeah, once you get the slide deck, you just come to the slide, you click on the link, and you can go take the survey and see the results from there. Other than that, there's also a ton of other educational content out at the Altero blogs, the MSP Dojo, the Hyper-V blog, the VMware blog, and a link to all of Altero's social accounts there as well. So with that, I just want to say thanks for joining us today. It's been great here talking to you. It's been great handling the questions. And I am 3 minutes over time, so I'm going to let you get back to your day, and hope to see you here again for another Altero sponsored webinar sometime in the future. Thanks for watching.